11 drones have gone over Picatinny Arsenal, which is about 5 miles from here in a direct line. Those drones should have been blown out of the sky. Why are we putting up with this?
Yes, that is a local mayor here in the United States suggesting the military should start blasting those mysterious drones out of the sky, harvesting them, he said. And I know you heard that here first last night, but I am not going to lie. I have been thinking about that and all the implications all day long, especially now that the Department of Homeland Security is getting involved. We're going to dive super deep into all of this. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. So by now, you've probably seen your social media flooded with what are supposed to be drones over the skies of New Jersey and beyond, or seen video of lawmakers trying to get straight answers from the FBI who say they don't know what's going on. Well, today, some mayors out here in New Jersey have had enough. A bunch of them headed to state police headquarters to get a briefing about what's going on, and they left pretty frustrated and talking about trying to get an all-out ban on drones until the mystery is solved. And we're going to get into all of that in just a bit. But before we do, out on the West Coast, the feds just announced the arrest of a guy trying to board a flight to China with a drone they say he used to spy on Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. So are all of the drones that we're seeing here foreign adversaries? Maybe. Just today, a member of Congress made this claim that the Pentagon quickly pushed back on. Take a listen.
And from very high sources, very qualified sources, very responsible sources, I'm going to tell you the real deal. Iran launched a mothership probably about a month ago that contains these drones. That mothership is off, I'm going to tell you the deal. It's off the east coast of the United States of America.
The real deal, again, the Pentagon says they have no evidence of that. So is there a chance that these are just a bunch of planes? Yeah, I can tell you, some of them are definitely going to be planes. Confirmation bias is a hell of a drug. And I went out there a couple of nights ago, and it's easy to see that in the fog, planes can look a lot closer than they actually are, and they can still remain pretty quiet because of the dense clouds. But there is a small percentage of the reports that seem to go way beyond just misidentified planes or some guy filming with a drone. Here's how things stand right now. Tonight, in the skies above New Jersey, trying to get to the bottom of a mysterious wave of SUV-sized drone sightings that so far have proved impossible to identify or to stop.
The minute you get eyes on them, they go dark.
It's not an airplane.
Reports of mysterious drones and lights in the sky are growing. From over the warships of the West Coast to nuclear sites across the West to Langley, Virginia, and most recently to Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey. The Pentagon says there is no evidence the drones are coming from a foreign adversary, but lawmakers on Capitol Hill are demanding answers from the FBI.
I don't have an answer of who's responsible for that, of one or more people that are responsible for those drone flights.
Those who have sent drones up to give chase, like local sheriff's departments, say they've never been able to see where they come from or where they land. Mine Hill Mayor Sam Morris chased this one down in his car and thinks the military should consider shooting them down. He says 11 drones have flown over a military site in New Jersey recently.
Those drones should have been blown out of the sky. Why are we putting up with this?
And as more people start to look up at the night sky, the FBI is asking anyone with credible video to send them in for analysis.
It's 2024. Are you telling me in this day and age somebody can fly drones of this size, the size of a car, if not bigger, and we have no idea who's doing it?
For now, yet another growing mystery in the sky. Another mystery, and we're joined by Mayor Michael Melham of the Township of Bellevue, New Jersey. You were in the meeting tonight on drones. Did you get any answers?
We did get answers. I don't think it was answers that we were looking for. I mean, the biggest takeaway, one of the nuggets of truth that I think came out of it was the fact that it was announced that we know for a fact these drones are specifically flying over our critical infrastructure. And if there was just one takeaway today, beyond the fact that New Jersey has no idea what's going on and our feds supposedly have no idea what's going on, that was the main takeaway today, that we know for a fact they are purposely surveilling our critical infrastructure.
And we're also seeing a flood of people sending in videos of what are planes. Is that complicating matters here?
It is. I mean, that was said today during our briefing that, a small manned aircraft can look like or replicate a drone, especially as you said, maybe it's foggy out or you're dealing with larger drones too that are almost 6 feet in diameter. So they can be confused with very similar lighting, which is interesting.
Yeah, very similar lighting. So does it seem like they are trying to disguise themselves as aircraft above, or does it seem like they just, I don't know, forgot to turn off the lights? That's the thing that boggles my mind about all of this mystery.
Yeah, I've been talking about these lights for a while because the governor even said, and we got confirmation today that when we have gotten close to it, they have turned off the lights and then dashed away. So the question remains, well, why have the lights on in the first place if drones don't need lights? So why have them on in the first place if you're just going to turn them off? I have to say that residents really do believe the fact that they are blinking lights that do mirror FAA regulation lights. That kind of makes people suspicious that maybe it is, in fact, the government or a private defense contractor.
Yeah, and then again, on the flip side, like if there's buzzing above you and you're only seeing black, that would seem pretty sketchy as well. So it's just so difficult to get to the bottom of this. You all have proposed, or I'm not sure if you have, but there have been proposals from mayors to ban all commercial drones until this is all sorted out. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea. Do I think it's going to go anywhere? Absolutely not. I have to say that out of the 200 plus mayors that were in this room, and this was an unprecedented meeting. Never in the history of New Jersey has every mayor been assembled, as well as members of our state legislature were also there. And we really did push back. There had to be 5 or 6 mayors that stood up and said, we want an immediate temporary ban on residential and commercial drones. And they kept telling us why that was a bad idea. And we kept standing up saying, we disagree. This is what we want. We want a temporary ban this way because law-abiding citizens will abide by that. So if they're downed for a couple days, anything we see in the nighttime sky that's not an airplane is going to be a drone. Therefore, we know where the bad guys are. One of the other takeaways that we got was, for a fact, we have no idea where they're coming from or where they're going. That's absolutely confirmed by New Jersey Homeland Security and our state police. We have no idea where they're coming from. So this might help us actually track them.
I mean, how? Like I know that's the question that you 200 mayors probably had in this room, but this is supposed to be the greatest country in the world, the most advanced military, the most secure airspace. Like, how do they not know where they're coming from and where they're going, especially if they keep showing up night after night after night?
Yeah, we had one mayor specifically. She represents northern New Jersey. She represents 4 different reservoirs that feed most of New Jersey. She had 60 drones over those reservoirs on Sunday. I mean, this is a cause for concern. They keep saying there's no threat. They keep saying there's no credible threat. But yet, if a drone goes a couple hundred feet in the air and collides with a 747, it'll take it down, just like a flock of seagulls would, just like a flock of geese would. So they can't keep saying there's no critical threat. They just can't keep saying it. Our residents are concerned that we don't have control over the airspace just above our homes. These things are flying at tree height. They're not thousands of feet in the air. Our residents are concerned, and we need answers.
So here is a difficult question. You probably heard the beginning of our show begin with one of your colleagues saying, well, if it's over Picatinny, like, why isn't the military shooting this down? And when they're at tree level, let's say somebody does have, like, a firearm in their home and this is at their tree level in their property, are you worried that people are going to start shooting these things down? And do you think that the military should be blasting them out of the sky?
Yeah, I mean, 2 different answers. Do I think they should be coming down? Yes. Do I think we should be acting, our government or our military? Absolutely. We need to take these things out of the sky. But the state police wanted us to warn our constituents. These are considered aircraft, and we cannot fire on aircraft. And they even pushed back as far as even if one of our state police helicopters intercepts, we have no legal authority. That's a federal thing. It's federal jurisdiction and federal regs to take an airplane or an aircraft out of the sky. We can do nothing. So we said, great, we understand you can't shoot it down maybe over our forests, but once it goes out to sea, we are coordinating. New Jersey is coordinating with the Coast Guard. Once it goes out to sea, will we take it out of the ground? Will we take it out of the air? We were told no, they will not do it. They seem to be resisting taking these things out of the air.
not to be a tinfoil hat guy, but did that seem sketchy to you? Is this following the regulation, or is there a possibility that this may be tech that's being tested that the government does know about, that may be our own military testing out new tech before fielding it in the battle?
I mean, I'm not here to give you a history lesson. We all know history. We all know that government isn't always truthful, especially when they have plausible deniability. They could just blame it on a private defense contractor, right? But they seem adamant that they're not going to take these things out of the air. I will tell you, here in Belleville, we're going to protect our critical infrastructure, and if the need arises, we will defend it.
Mayor Michael Mellon, I really appreciate the passion you bring to all this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And it is not every day that the head of the FBI quits. This is not related to what we were just talking about, but it is what happened today when Christopher Wray officially resigned as the FBI director. And you might remember, Wray was originally a Trump guy. He was hired by the former president in 2017, but it didn't take long for that relationship to go sideways. And Trump was not quiet about it, recently slamming Wray this past weekend in an interview with NBC's Meet the Press and our friend Kristen Welker.
Sir, are you going to fire the current FBI Director Christopher Wray, who you appointed?
Well, I can't say I'm thrilled with him. He invaded my home. I'm suing the country over it. He invaded Mar-a-Lago. I'm very unhappy with the things he's done.
And let's bring in NBC's justice reporter, Ryan Riley. Ryan, so he says he wasn't thrilled. That's got to be like the biggest understatement of the year. How much bad blood was there between these two?
A lot, because of that raid in Mar-a-Lago. And remember, it used to be mad love because Donald Trump is the one who, in fact, appointed Christopher Wray to be the director of the FBI. And that came, of course, after the firing of James Comey. And just to put that in historical perspective to you, for the past time since Watergate, for the past several decades, there's been this norm of having these 10-year terms. And the idea is to sort of remove the FBI director from the daily political grind, sort of take him out of the pocket of the president a little bit. And now what we've had is a situation where Donald Trump has pushed out or fired two FBI directors. And the only other FBI director who sort of moved out came during the early Clinton administration, and that was because there was a big ethics scandal involving him. So really, the only two times that you don't have an asterisk next to their name at someone being pushed out of the FBI have both been under President Donald Trump, or in this case, President-elect Donald Trump.
Now, all this is coming also as polling is showing that people, like a lot of people, have lost trust in the FBI in a big way. And that was before all the drone stuff we talked about at the beginning of the show here. Today, we see this resignation. So does this hurt that or help that?
And what's amazing about it, especially if you sort of do the crosstabs on it and look at this politically, right? So Republicans, it's just been this enormous drop in trust in the FBI. Historically, you'd have the left be very skeptical of the FBI, and for Democrats, really, the FBI has been kind of on a straight line, or at least moderately improving during the Trump era. Whereas with Republicans, there's just this huge fall off from the time that Donald Trump took office, and a lot of that is because of the rhetoric that we see Donald Trump using against the FBI. Talking about the deep state, and that's just not really the reality of the Bureau. If you look at what the Bureau is made up of, it's a lot of law enforcement folks who generally tend to be conservative leaning. It's disproportionately white and male, which swings in one direction. And so that's not really the reality, that this idea that it's some liberal bastion, right? It's a lot of former military folks. In fact, if you want to get hired into the FBI, one of the best ways to do it is to be in the military first, because you have an advantage. You can enter at a later age, and there's all these advantages to get it in the hiring process. You're a preferred candidate. So that's really the makeup of the Bureau, and that's just not what the reality that we hear, being expressed, I guess, in some of the attacks that Trump has made.
I know over on Capitol Hill, our colleagues have been asking lawmakers all day what they think about all this. Let's take a quick listen to some of those responses.
I want to make sure that we restore the reputation of these agencies, these departments like the FBI and the Department of Justice and the intelligence community, that we restore their reputation as non-political institutions.
I do worry about a precedent set. We set up an FBI director to have a 10-year term, so they're not going to fall under undue political influence. This is a very serious job. It needs a very serious candidate.
So that's the word from the halls of Congress, but what is the word with the rank and file working FBI agents that are over at the Hoover Building? What do they think about the changes that they're going to see soon?
Yeah, well, it really depends, because I think at the Hoover Building, certainly that's where, headquarters is, and a lot of people concerned about that, but what this is going to mean with a Kash Patel potentially coming in. But across the country, I think it varies, because there are a lot of FBI employees who don't like some of the things that leadership has been doing and are conservative leaning. And like Donald Trump, he does, in fact, have a lot of support within the FBI. And in fact, after January 6th, one email that went to a top official at the FBI was saying that we have a problem here because a lot of people within the Bureau are sympathetic to those who stormed the U.S. Capitol. And that's really been one of the cruxes of this entire thing, is that you had a lot of pushback to those January 6 cases from within the Bureau, Gadi.
Interesting. NBC's Ryan Riley, thanks so much. Let's go over to NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Hey there, Gabe. It seems like quite a you either get fired or you quit situation. Is there any word from Trump tonight? Any victory lap that we're seeing there?
Oh, certainly. Look, Gadi, Trump world is celebrating this development. But as you said, this really isn't much of a surprise. Christopher Wray didn't have much of a choice in this matter. It was not unexpected that he would resign. The question was whether he'd make Trump fire him. But it was clear, as you mentioned from Trump's interview with Kristen Welker, that he wasn't pleased with what Christopher Wray was doing, and he had already selected Kash Patel to replace him. But Donald Trump did post something on social media shortly after this development, and he called this a great day for America, he says, as it will end the weaponization of what has become known as the United States Department of Injustice. I just don't know what happened to him. Again, you see there in that post the frustration that President-elect Trump has with Christopher Wray, even though, as Ryan mentioned 7 years ago, he did pick him to lead the FBI, Gadi.
And it looks like in that post he was talking about the rank and file there. I mean, his pick to lead the FBI, Kash Patel, he had some pretty interesting things to say about what he would do as FBI director if he was in charge back in September. Let's take a quick listen.
The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big, and the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover Building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state.
Okay, so Museum of the Deep State, you got to be okay, is he being facetious here, or are we actually going to see something like that happen over at the Hoover Building? But I think the underlying question is, is there just a ton of bureaucracy to cut at the Federal Bureau of Investigations?
Well, that's certainly what Kash Patel is arguing, and that's what many Republicans, as you just heard John Cornyn say, that the goal is to restore what they see as integrity to this agency. Now, we do know, NBC News has learned that according to a person familiar with the conversation, that Kash Patel did tell a top senator that he will not actually get rid of the Hoover Building. So there's that. But I think, Gadi, this all boils down to saying one thing when you're outside of politics, and it's another thing when you're in the arena. Kash Patel now on Capitol Hill trying to convince these senators to vote, for him to become the next FBI director. So he's having to be a little bit more careful about what he says. But this is his brand. He, for a long time, has been railing against the FBI. He's said that there are dozens of people in his book that he mentioned as being part of the so-called deep state. It will be interesting, though, to see how he ends up leading the FBI if he's confirmed. But there is some concern among rank-and-file members of the FBI and the Justice Department about some of the reforms that he might put in place, Scott.
But you're saying that there's not going to be any elementary school tours of a Museum of the Deep State. That's for sure.
Apparently not, according to our source, Scotty.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. And tonight we are seeing more evidence come in that seems to link Luigi Mangione with the murder of a health insurance CEO shot down in cold blood. Now, new video possibly showing the suspect moments after the shooting last week. This was recorded near a bus terminal where police say they think the suspect escaped New York. Now, a store owner told a local TV station that NYPD has asked for that footage. And also today, police say the gun recovered from Mangione in Pennsylvania matched 3 shell casings found at at the murder scene in Manhattan where United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was killed. Those are the same casings that had the messages deny, defend, and depose written on them. And then there are the fingerprints. Police say Mangione's prints were left on snacks he bought at a Starbucks. And on top of all that, there's a new clue pointing towards a motive. Apparently, there was a handwritten note found on Mangione expressing his frustration with the U.S. healthcare system. Quote, "The U.S. is the #1 in the world, but life expectancy of Americans is ranked 42nd in the world." But let's first start with George Solis. He's out there in Pennsylvania tonight. So, George, I mean, this time yesterday, we were hearing no evidence over and over again from Mangione's lawyer. What's he saying about all the evidence we saw laid out just today?
Yeah, Gadi, good to be with you. So at this point, we're not really sure what defense attorney Tom Dickey has told his client today. He spent most of the day in court, but as you recall, yesterday during a press briefing, he said he would encourage his client to plead not guilty to all the charges, including those 2 felonies and 3 misdemeanors that he faces here in Pennsylvania. Here at the state court, it has been quiet. We've seen a number of cameras come and go throughout the day, not a lot of activity. There does seem to be some growing unrest here within the community. Earlier, we had someone honking a horn here in protest of our presence here. So you might see a little bit of that community resistance here to just the number of people. But again, at this point, we know that he is fighting that extradition back to Manhattan as this trail of evidence starts to grow in the case, Gadi.
And, you know, as everybody combs through a lot of his social media presence, like on his X profile, he's got what looks like a back injury or maybe some sort of X-ray of a back injury. Are police investigating that as another possible motive here? How does that play into this?
Yeah, at this point, they really are exploring every and any avenue that comes their way, and that certainly seems to be a part of it. When we saw in those notebooks that police say they found in that spiral notebook that he did seem to have some grievances with the healthcare industry. And so that is sort of playing into this larger question of could that have been a possible motive? Is there more to it than that? Is there a mental health component? These are all questions that investigators will start to piece. And we are starting to see a little bit more of that start to trickle in as this investigation builds. I mean, we saw today from the investigators saying that they found not only the fingerprints, they also found those bullets. But again, the question still remains about that ghost gun that was recovered. Was that something that Mangione allegedly built himself? Was it something he recovered? These are all questions that investigators are starting to piece together, and we're hoping to get a more concrete timeline in the growing days as this case builds, and whether or not after that extradition hearing back here in Pennsylvania to see when and if he'll get to Manhattan. It's really, I should say, not a question of if, but when he gets back to Manhattan, Gadi.
George Solis, thank you. And since the killing of that health insurance executive, Brian Thomas, there has been a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff online. So many people sharing their frustrations with health insurance companies, especially when it comes to claims being denied.
I've gone on different medications specifically to complete the denials requests.
I knew to go to the insurance commissioner to try to fight their denial of my claims, which most people do not know.
We only sometimes get a line, sometimes we don't get anything, sometimes we just check on our own and we find that the coverage has been denied.
The reason for the denial was because the nurse that reviews all of the claims happened to be on vacation. So they couldn't find anybody.
When it comes to that data, United Healthcare has the highest rate of denials of any private insurance company at 32%. That is double the industry average. Joining us now is Sarah Cliff. She's an investigative healthcare reporter at the Times. Sarah, thanks so much for being with us. The frustration, I mean, it is tragic that this whole conversation has reached a boiling point on the other side of what we all saw on that surveillance video. But I do want to read a part of a new email that the CEO of United Health wrote to employees today. Quote, "What you do matters. It really, really matters. There is no higher calling than helping people. Nothing more vital to the human condition than healthcare." I got to ask you, does that seem to address all the frustration and all the anger that employees of that company are probably feeling right now from the public?
You know, it probably doesn't. As we've seen over the past few days, there is just this really palpable rage against the health insurance industry that has come out at this moment. And like you had said, a particular frustration with denials, which can be opaque and confusing and not clear why something your doctor says isn't covered by insurance. And I think many are seeing, because of some changes in the health insurance industry, that they don't feel like their health insurance is helping them get healthier. They often feel like it is standing in the way of them getting the medical care that they need.
Gut check me here, but culturally, it does feel like something is happening. I've been seeing so many patient horror stories. And I mean, there's even songs like this one that was posted on Instagram yesterday that seem to be touching a chord that is starting to go viral.
The procedure that you're needing ain't the cost-effective route, and only 2% of people end up winning a dispute. So if you get sick, pray to God for help, because your doctor's got to pray to United Health.
I mean, is this an inflection point for the entire industry, maybe?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. I mean, what we know is that health insurance has generally become skimpier over the past decade. Deductibles have gone up. Co-payments, generally patients are being asked to pay a greater share of their bill than they were 5-10 years ago. A lot of that reflects the fact that the prices keep going up and up, the prices that are charged at hospitals and doctors' offices. And you do wonder, how far does this go before there's some kind of change? We have generally let it go quite far. We have the highest prices in the world for medical care by far. But you do think at some point you might need some kind of reform, as patients are clearly struggling to get the care that they need.
And I do want to ask, I mean, I've been stuck on the phone with, health insurance companies for hours and hours and hours trying to understand a denial or trying to, get something through. And it is extremely frustrating. And you cover this. So what happens when people are denied coverage that they know that they need and should get? Can they challenge that? What options do they have?
Yeah, they can challenge that. I think that's one of the things that it doesn't get as much attention. And we know that only about 1% of denied claims are appealed, but everybody has the right to appeal a decision. They can go to state regulators called an insurance commissioner if they feel that their insurer is acting in bad faith and file a complaint. There are steps you can take, but I think one of the things that is so frustrating is, like you said, they often require hours and hours on the phone. They require a lot of legwork on behalf of consumers who are, likely quite sick if this is what they're dealing with in the first place.
Sarah Cliff with the New York Times. Thank you so much for chatting with us tonight, and thank you for your reporting.
Thank you.
And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, coast-to-coast weather worries out west. Dry conditions mean the fire threat hasn't totally burned out. While up and down the East Coast, cities are being pounded by wind and rain. We are tracking all of it. Plus, last laugh, well, Alex Jones's Infowars, it's not the onions. How did the auction bid go so bad, and what happens now? And later this hour, we are going deep, deep underground, something like 1,500 feet for a first-hand look at the highest-grade uranium mine in the world. How AI is fueling the sudden nuclear renaissance. That's in the future of everything. Hey, welcome back, and here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. The man accused of trying to kill Donald Trump is trying to delay his trial until late next year. Lawyers for Ryan Ruth told a federal judge that they were not ready for trial, which is supposed to start in fewer than 2 months. They're claiming that there's too much evidence to sift through. The judge says she'll make her decision soon. And the search for Hana Kobayashi, the missing woman from Maui, has finally come to an end. She has officially been found safe and sound, and she has talked with her family, who released a statement asking for privacy as they process the whole whirlwind of the last month. Right now, no other details have been released. And we are learning a little more about that Macy's employee who hid over $150 million in expenses. Officials say the worker told investigators that they actually made a mistake while punching numbers for delivery expenses, and then they tried to cover it up. And today, Macy's confirmed that the employee did not do it to put more money in their pocket. They're also saying they're taking steps to make sure a mistake like that never happens again. And remember the guy who went kayaking, then faked his own drowning death, and left his wife and 3 kids for Eastern Europe? Well, he is back in the United States, and he's now in custody. Officials say he returned on his own because of his family, and he's been charged with obstruction. And apparently, beans are in and red meat is out, according to a new HHS study. The panel of nutrition experts says Americans should be piling more peas and lentils on their plate and cutting back on processed meats and starchy vegetables. The advice is going to shape new dietary guidelines, which are updated every 5 years by apparently my mother. And turning to the Franklin fire that's tearing across Malibu, growing to more than 4,000 acres tonight. This has been a beast to contain, with only 7% of it under control right now. But luckily, those gusty winds that have been fueling it are starting to weaken. And there are more than 1,500 firefighters out there battling it, keeping it as small as it is right now. It has managed to explode in size over the past 2 days, at times giving people just minutes to get to safety.
We just set everything up at camp, and so we're trying to pack up as quickly as possible. Wow, I'm just in shock. Like, literally every camper already left, and we just got the knock, so it's only taken us about 5 minutes.
Evacuation orders are still in for thousands of people, and at least 7 structures have been destroyed so far. Even celebrities like Cher, Dick Van Dyke, they had to leave their homes. Meanwhile, the East Coast is dealing with the opposite problem, a whole lot of rain out here. A powerful storm system bringing strong winds, thunderstorms, even snow, and trailing right behind that is a cold snap that's going to sweep right in for folks in the Great Lakes in the Northeast, possibly bringing more than a foot of snow and making things extra chilly. Bill Cairns is standing by tracking it all, but first let's go out to David Noriega in Malibu. David, is the worst of it over, and how bad would it have gotten if L.A. County firefighters hadn't jumped on this right away?
Yeah, Gadi, great question. It does seem, at least for now, like the worst of it is over. And the biggest factor there is the weather conditions. When this fire started overnight between Monday and Tuesday, there were very strong Santa Ana winds. That is what caused the fire to explode in size overnight. Now, at the time, there were red flag conditions covering much of Southern California, millions of people's worth of land in Southern California. Red flag conditions mean basically hot, dry, and windy weather. Those red flag warnings have been lifted, and the firefighters and officials that we've been talking to today say that they expect more moisture and less wind in the conditions under which they're going to be fighting this fire in the coming days. That's going to make a huge difference, and we already saw some of that today. Gadi, you mentioned that 7 structures have been destroyed in this fire. When you think about how long it's been burning and how fast it grew in the beginning, it really is remarkable that it has not been more than 7 structures. This is Malibu. This isn't a remote rural place. There are a lot of houses here, a lot of people who live here, and the firefighters did really a remarkable job of keeping this relatively contained. We're actually outside the Incident Command Center where all of this is being managed. It was LA County Fire at first. Subsequently, CAL FIRE took over, the control operations because this fire is so large and so complex. Complex because of how many people live around here, how many structures. Complex also because of the territory. This is really craggy, canyon-like territory where fires, A, can spread very fast, and B, are very difficult to access for firefighters on the ground, meaning they have had to really rely on air attacks on those fires. Today, we saw lots and lots of aircrafts dumping both water and fire retardant on those fires, and especially if these conditions hold, then the firefighters that we're talking to really are optimistic that they're going to be able to keep pushing this in the right direction. Gadi?
Yeah, I can't imagine. With those winds, I mean, so many people were expecting this to go absolutely apocalyptic. I got to ask, though, we're saying it's looking better, it's feeling better, 7 structures lost, but it seems like fire lines are holding, and then, you see the numbers, and it's like 7% contained, and a lot of people that aren't familiar with fires are like, 7%, that does not sound good at all. Walk us through, what that means, 7%, and does it actually mean that the fire is still uncontained, or do they have a pretty good handle?
Yeah, the containment numbers are tricky if you don't, live on the West Coast and cover fires and get used to what they mean, right? Because 7 does sound like a small number, but it's not the only factor. And first of all, I should also say there's going to be a press conference in about 25 minutes with fire officials in which they're likely to update that containment number. So we can reasonably expect it, I think, to go up. But even if it doesn't, Containment means how much of a physical perimeter basically they have built around the fire. It takes a really long time to fully physically contain a fire, but there are other factors that dictate whether that fire is growing, and specifically whether it's growing in a way that threatens structures and threatens places where people live, right? So they are building that perimeter, but at the same time doing other work to suppress the fire in other places and to keep it from growing. So that containment figure it's really not the only factor to take into account. There are lots of other factors, including, like I said, the weather. And so when you look at that whole picture, that's when you can kind of conclude this is still trending in the right direction.
I hope people can find some comfort in your context there. David Noriega, thank you. Now let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill Cairns, are we in the clear here?
The fire is not obviously contained, but the Santa Ana winds are gone. So if they were coming back in a day or two, I'd be concerned, but that's not in the forecast either, so that's good. And it's, to explain what happened, this thing increased a lot more in size last night than was anticipated. So what happened is on the western flank, so here's Malibu Beach and here's downtown, this is Pepperdine here. On the west side, it raced up the mountain wall and then back down into another canyon. And when it raced down, it had a lot of vegetation and the wind was blowing it down. So that's why we had another 1,000 acres that were, burned. And so that was it wasn't exactly predicted, but that's why the acreage jumped so much. That's not going to happen anymore. And the reason why is that the winds have finally begun to die off. And we're also going to be watching the relative humidity going up. So first with the winds, you notice, the winds are very light right now. I mean, LAX is only at 12 right now, and Camarillo is at 5. So this is as light as the winds have been in a couple days, so that's great. The relative humidity, we also need that to go up. So this is desert air that right now is over Fulton and Long Beach. But look at LAX. Relative humidity is up to 50%. The marine layer, the ocean air, is finally starting to head inland, and that will include where the Franklin fire is there in Malibu, Gadi. So that's why we should see the containment really jumping as we go throughout the next 12, 24 hours.
If you can't get rain, at least humidity at 50%. Yes. That's always a good sign. What about the storm that we're experiencing out here in the Northeast? I mean, I don't know what's going on the streets, but it feels like a storm to me. I'm heading west tomorrow, but how long is this going to last here?
The night. So we have to get through the night tonight. We'll see how much wind damage we get. We'll also have to see how many problems or issues that we get as far as the airports go. Now, looking at the maps, the airports are a disaster right now. I mean, we're at 183-minute delays in Newark. You do the quick math on that. We're at 3 hours. LaGuardia, 1 hour. JFK, 2.5 hours. Boston's a little over 2 hours in delays. There's been a bunch of cancellations also. And that's because of the high winds, low visibility, and all the rain going through the Northeast. And the winds have been kicking up, especially in the last couple hours. That'll continue right through about midnight. We haven't had any significant flash flooding yet. I have my eyes closely on southern Vermont here. Already 2 to 3 inches has fallen. There's about 1 foot, 2 feet of snow on the ground. That's a bad combination. But we're coming in this drought, and a lot of the rivers have been pretty low. So we'll see how bad that gets. And we still have the high wind warnings tonight, Gadi. Last gust I saw there in Boston, 47 miles per hour. So it's definitely howling a little bit.
Definitely howling out there on the street. Thank you so much, Bill. And coming up, if you thought you've been paying more for everything, you were right about that. Our Brian Chung is breaking down the latest inflation numbers. But first, you got to see this. Normally, we think of Santa shimming down chimneys and into our homes. This past weekend, Santa was seen dangling from the side of a building. Now, participants at the Norwalk Holiday Extravaganza, they looked up and were pretty shocked to see Santa's jacket get caught on the building's rigging as he was trying to make a dramatic descent. Some firefighters, they were able to rescue Santa by pulling him through a window, and he was not hurt, and those firefighters are now permanently on the nice list. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. It wasn't so long ago that elections used to be about Florida, Florida, Florida. Well, this year, they were about groceries, groceries, and groceries. The cost of eggs just too damn high. So what's inflation like 1 month after a Trump win? NBC's Brian Chung breaks down the latest report.
Hey there, Gadi. Well, new inflation numbers that we got this morning tell us that prices are still rising in this country, but it's certainly a market improvement from the rapid inflation that we saw, which peaked in the summer of 2022. Let me explain. So the number that we got this morning, 2.7%. That's how much prices rose between November of this year and November of last year. This is exactly what economists had expected, but it is certainly a faster pace than the 2.6% inflation rate we had seen in the October to October period. Now, when we zoom out, though, you can see a little bit of improvement, even though there was a monthly uptick in that rate. Yes, 2.7% right here. You can see that upward trend, but it's much better than the over 3% readings that we were getting in the beginning of the year. And if you zoom out even farther beyond this chart, that's still an improvement from the 9% inflation rate that we saw in the summer of 2022. Now, the problem is that economists say 2.7% is still above the 2% rate that they say is really healthy for the economy, so there's still some work to do there. Now, when we unpack this and look at the certain categories of price increases, take a look at energy costs. These are monthly changes that you're looking at now. So between September and October, energy prices basically went flat. Between October and November, they did inflate by 0.2%. Shelter costs, this is the biggest cost for most Americans. Mortgage payments, rent payments, that did decelerate a little bit. It's still going up. Again, this is a positive number, but it went up by 0.3% compared to 0.4% in the month prior. But food prices, the big one for most Americans, it actually accelerated in terms of price inflation, up 0.4% in November compared to just 0.2% between September and October. And when you zoom into those food components, you can see things like, for example, milk prices, they're up by about 14 cents. But eggs, this is the big one that a lot of people are paying attention to, up by about $1.50. That's certainly painful for those that are using a lot of eggs at home. Lastly, though, the one good news, the silver lining, if you will, in this report, gasoline prices going down from about $3.50 to $3.18. Yes, that's only about 30 cents. However, that could be big time savings for those that are especially hitting the road ahead of that holiday travel. A lot of that because of that switch to the winter blend of gasoline, which does come with a little bit of savings there. But again, much cheaper than this time last year. Certainly a lot to chew on. But that inflation report, again, showing prices still rising in America. Gadi?
Yeah, a silver lining for everywhere except for California, maybe. Brian, thank you. And we've got a new twist for you tonight in the Infowars Alex Jones saga. A bankruptcy judge has rejected the Onion's bid to buy Infowars, saying that the auction process was not fair. Now, to quickly recap, the Onion, that happily fake news company, won the bankruptcy auction of Alex Jones's Infowars last month, or so they thought. They were planning on rebuilding the website to spoof the same kind of far-right conspiracy theories that Jones would post on Infowars. So what does all this mean? Who's going to end up with the last laugh? Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, the judge is not laughing. He's saying that the process was not on the up and up, wasn't transparent. How do bankruptcy court proceedings usually go here?
They go very complexly. They are really, really complicated. Bankruptcy is a very narrow practice of the law, practiced by people who do nothing but. But generally speaking, when there is an auction like this, it's not necessarily just the highest dollar amount. And that was kind of an issue here, because it wasn't so much that the Onion was bidding a certain dollar amount. They were also trying to add to that amount by using waivers by the families, that they would be giving some of their money back in order to make this auction go through. So I wasn't that surprised, because if it was true that one bidder bid nearly twice or more than twice what the winning bidder got by winning the bid, then you knew it was going to be something of a long shot to sustain that when they took it to the judge. So I'm not surprised. There's going to be a new auction. The same trustee is going to handle it. That seems strange, because it's the same trustee that arguably didn't do this on the up and up, as the judge said.
Up and up. I mean, this is one of those existential questions I hate to ask you, but what is fair, right? Because in this case, it was the families of the victims here that seemed to be cooperating with the Onion to try to get the Onion ownership of this thing. And yet the whole thing kind of gets convoluted in this bankruptcy court. And, it's one of those questions of what's justice? Who's supposed to get this? And what's the whole point of this bankruptcy court in the first place?
Yeah, you make a good point. But here's the thing. You don't normally have a bankruptcy auction situation like this, where one of the bidders is involved with families who have an interest in the outcome of the sale based on this tragic lawsuit that they brought against the company to begin with. That kind of thing doesn't happen very often. So most of the time, we're just talking dollars and cents. Who has the most to bid in order to win the bid? And so really all this does is send this back down to the auction process. It might go quickly, it might take a while, but all it does is just hit the reset button. And maybe the same bidder can prevail again.
And in the meantime, does Alex Jones keep his armored truck and then all the supplements and the Infowars Airways?
As I understand it, for the time being, he's able to continue on with the entity as it is. That's my understanding.
Interesting. We'll keep watching it. Danny Ceballos, thank you. And still ahead, inside the home of a fallen dictator, Richard Engel, with more amazing reporting tonight on the ground in Syria. He's taking us inside Assad's home, coming up next. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Brazilian police say they just busted a huge illegal gold mining scheme. And the whole operation was allegedly happening on indigenous lands, and miners apparently used foreigners to smuggle the gold to other countries. Police say the operation mined $166 million worth of gold. North Korea, they are finally reacting to all that South Korea martial law drama. State media in the North called the act by President Yoon insane, adding that vulnerabilities in the South's society have been exposed. They claim the South is acting like a fascist dictator. And German authorities raiding the headquarters of Adidas for a second day. This is according to the Financial Times, and this is all tied to a years-long tax investigation related to imported goods. Adidas says that they've provided investigators with relevant documents and have been talking to customs officials about this for years. And the FIFA World Cup is heading to Saudi Arabia in 2034. We should note the country was the only bid submitted to host. It's a big win for a country investing heavily in global sports, but it comes with a lot of controversy. Saudi Arabia's human rights have been highly criticized, and watchdogs are also concerned about the safety of migrant workers who will be building the facilities there. And over in Syria, the world is still unpacking the collapse of the Assad regime. The rebel alliance is now asking other countries to turn over, quote, criminals who have fled the country. And by criminals, they mean Assad loyalists. The rebels are also ransacking anything to do with the Assad regime, including the family's home. NBC's Richard Engel got an inside look at the life of luxury now in shambles.
The former Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad lived in a palace on a hill high above Damascus. Now it's under control of the rebels who overthrew him. Today they gave us an exclusive tour inside.
Can understand why he wouldn't want to leave this.
Assad and his wife seem to have modern tastes. You are first greeted by the grand atrium, accented by a classic wood-paneled library. Upstairs was for the family only. The apartment where the rebels say Assad lived.
You could tell this was really the inner sanctum because everywhere here there are thick, bulletproof doors. They are extremely, extremely heavy, solid metal, electric keypads. This could have been sealed off, but in the end, it didn't do him any good.
All the security was to protect his bedroom, ransacked after he fled.
There's something curious whenever you go to someone's house. People always want to see their bathrooms, just get a sense of how they lived. Well, this was Assad's private bathroom in here with a jacuzzi tub. Can't imagine he'll be living this well in exile in Russia.
Today, the new interim government said Syria is broke. Cash flow didn't seem to be a problem for the man at the top.
Ah, his personal barber chair. So you can imagine him here, getting ready for the day.
Assad lived well as a dictator until it all ended for the man accused of being responsible for the deaths of 500,000 Syrians, all to protect his life of power and luxury.
Rebels we've spoken to here in Damascus say they want Assad to be sent back from Russia and tried here for war crimes.
Bathroom, barber chair, who would have thought we would have seen that day? Richard Engel, thank you. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything, and we are talking nuclear power tonight, helping fuel the AI revolution. We're going to dig deep, way, way deep under the surface of the Earth into a one-of-a-kind effort to mine uranium. That's coming up next, so stay tuned. And tonight in the future of everything, did you know that more companies are using nuclear power to energize their AI systems? And as demand for nuclear power grows, a lot more uranium is needed. And that means going way, way, way underground to get it. So let's hitch a ride with CNBC's Pippa Stevens as she takes us inside the world's highest grade uranium deposit in Canada.
We're about 1,600 feet underground at the world's highest grade uranium deposit. This mine alone provides about 11% of global annual uranium demand. But it's really hard to mine here, and so Canada-based Cameco developed an entirely new system that's only used here at Cigar Lake. To get to the uranium, workers go down into the earth 450 meters. By comparison, the Empire State Building is 443 meters tall. They then drill upwards into pockets of the uranium-rich ore, shooting water at high speeds to extract the material. It's transported underground through a series of pipes, ground into a sand-like substance, and pumped to the surface. We got an exclusive look at the mine's unique drilling process. Parts of this area have already been mined. You can tell because if you look up at the ceiling, you can see where the jet boring system drilled upwards to access the ore. And now, because they got all of the ore out of that cavity, it's been backfilled with concrete. Now, Cigar Lake developed a specialized jet boring system to access this very high grade of uranium. The system runs along these tracks so that they can move it along the length of this tunnel. Cameco is the biggest uranium producer in the West, and Cigar Lake is its second largest mine. The nuclear industry overall is benefiting from a number of tailwinds, most recently support from big tech.
It came on very fast. All of a sudden, about a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, we started hearing about these hyperscalers, the Microsoft, the Google, NVIDIA, like Meta needing massive amounts of clean electricity and being responsible for the electrons that they were going to use, and start to look at nuclear and say, hey, we want to be in on the nuclear piece.
Cameco doesn't disclose how much of its uranium goes to the U.S., but they're the only meaningful producer in Canada, and Canada is 30% of the U.S.'s uranium. And with geopolitical tensions rising, including around nuclear power, mines like this one are becoming increasingly important.
Pippa Stevens, hoping you are sleeping with your Geiger counter tonight. Thank you so much for that. And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.